You're going to use MySQL Workbench in order to create an ERD, an Entity Relationship Diagram. And as we go through this, let's begin selecting models here, and then we add the plus sign to add a model. And then here we see add diagram. And along this column here, we can find add table. And then that will show us our pointer finger along with the table. We click anywhere on the screen, double click table. Here we have the opportunity to change the name of the table. We can call it patients. We can press enter. You'll note that the table changes immediately to patients. Here we have the opportunity to create the columns. And by default, it will create ID patients. My preference is to remove the repetitiveness of ID patients, and when we get into SQL programming, it will become more evident as to why that would be helpful. We can continue on by adding additional columns. Here we can add first name, and you'll note the difference between these two columns. Here, int stands for integer, and it's automatically adding an ID to our patients. And so every patient name will have a unique ID created by the program itself, by the database. And here we call this the primary key, PK, and the default requirement is that it's not null, NN. And so we leave those checked. Here, when we have our first name, the default has come to variable character, and it's allowing us 45 characters. The default is to leave it entirely blank, so we can click on not null if we prefer to have a not null entry here. Next, if we'd like to add last name, you can see here that it's creating a third column within the patient's table. Again, we can click on not null. And if we consider things such as, for instance, data quality or data governance, when we're adding certain variables or columns and we don't have the information, perhaps it's helpful to leave it as not, to leave it blank, so that we are not forced to enter in any particular arbitrary number that isn't relevant, and then later on lead to data quality issues. And so just for the sake of example, I'm going to leave date of birth, DOB, as allowed to be null, and I'm going to change the data type to date, and you'll see here that it's not available. However, you can scroll up and then it'll show the scroll bar here. So you can select date for date of birth, and that completes our first table, so we can click out of that. Now, we then can create a second table if we wish. Again, double click. Let's call this allergy. And this allows us to quickly see the column headers. So if we'd like to do this, we can click allergy, click the allergy ID. Again, remove allergy here, leave it as ID. You see that the primary key and the not null are automatically entered. Here, if we want to add column, we have an additional allergy column. We can say allergy name, and then perhaps allergy type. And here we can leave it not null as well. And the reason I would do that is the allergy names as well as the types, as we get later on into the course, I'll explain how it might be useful to create an external table or a referencing table where we have, say, a vetted list of a national data set database that has all of the allergies listed, so that we avoid having to type things incorrectly and have multiple variable types. It allows us to create drop-down menus more quickly, and then also to remove them if we need to. So here we can show, we've got these two tables. Perhaps we would like to add a third, such as medication, for instance. And so we add medication. Again, we can press enter here, and then we show our columns available here. When we click to edit, it automatically adds our primary key as ID, which we welcome. And then here, again, we can say name, require this, and then we can say perhaps dose it. All right. Now, if we're interested in creating the relationship part of the diagrams, once we minimize this piece, we can then begin to add the relationships here. So we have available one-to-one, one-to-many, and then we have a dashed and a solid line. We won't worry about whether or not we use the dashed or the solid line by way of introduction here, but for your awareness, the dashed line represents a weaker relationship, and a solid line represents a strong relationship. Here we have many to many. And so when we're wanting to draw a connection between patients and allergy, we want to state that a patient may have more than one allergy. And so in this case, we can select one to many, and then we select the table that we would like to have as the referencing table. And so we have one to many, and here you see patients now becomes a foreign key within the allergy table. And as I'd previously indicated, I had removed the patients at the end of what had said ID, and that's because it automatically populates the table name with the underscore. And when we get into SQL programming, you'll note that when we call on this specific column, we'll be typing allergy dot patients underscore ID. Had we not changed it, we would be typing allergy dot patients underscore ID patients, which is redundant and unnecessary. And so if we continue to do this, we draw another relationship. We want one patient to be able to have many medications if necessary. But we also want our patients to be able to have no medications or no allergies. And so if we want to change these crow feet here, we can double click on the relationship line, and we have the option for foreign key. So we can click on foreign key, and you'll see here that the referencing table is listed as mandatory. It's not, and so that's saying that we don't need to call upon allergy, and you'll note that as soon as we click mandatory, off, then we have this circle signifying 0. Again, when it's mandatory, we don't have the option for 0, but when we take off mandatory, we do. So we'll continue with that, and then we'll do the same for this medication table. So you can see here again, medication table, the foreign key is medication. So here we have, the foreign key is patients underscore ID within the medication table. So the referencing table we remove as mandatory. And so you can see here that we have the 0 indicating the 0, one or many relationship. Now, after we've created this entity relationship diagram, we can go to, if you can see it, File, and then we will save model as, and say we'd like to save, let's call it ERD. We save, and it's asking me to replace because I currently have this on my desktop. And so you can see ERD, and then this becomes a MySQL Workbench. And so MWB is the extension. If you'd like to print out this or have it saved as a PDF, you'd again go to File and then Export. And here you have additional options to save as a single page PDF or save as an image file, which is also useful if writing documentation, for instance, and wanting to include examples of the table without having to do a screenshot. And so that concludes this brief tutorial on creating an entity relationship diagram using MySQL Workbench.